I've always taken a liking to reading these stories here. My favorite was probably one that was brought to my attention called The Smiling Man. While reading this story, it made me relive my own experience I've had while walking down the street with my father. Unfortunately, I'm here to share with you that experience. Growing up, I was raised by a single father since my mom had a lot of mental health issues and she eventually left us, living in a rather decently sized city in a less than moderate downtown apartment. My father, a young man who was practically a workaholic, in order to support me as well as keep both of us in decent housing, would usually bring me to a nearby family member to watch over me while he was at work. At the time of this occurrence, I was about 7 and still didn't understand how to take care of myself at home while my father was at work. In other words, I struggled to make microwavable popcorn. Yeah, I was one of those kids. It was the weekend and my dad was heading to one of his 2 jobs. Thus, he was going to bring me to my aunt's home, which was a few blocks down. We usually walked considering my father's job as well as my aunt's home wasn't too far away and we couldn't afford a car. Let's focus on what happened. Don't remember the specific date. I think it was early summer or Saturday. Around 7 o'clock p.m. maybe. I'm in my Scooby-Doo pajamas, happily awaiting my sleepover with my wonderful auntie. And my father is getting ready to leave. I grab a movie to watch at my aunt's house, probably Blue's Clues or Scooby-Doo. We leave our room, lock up the apartment, and head out onto the sidewalk. Immediately after walking out, I noticed there is a man leaning against the outer building next to the door. He is smoking something and just casually standing there. He was wearing a baseball hat, but that is all I can really remember about him. We began walking down the road in the direction of my aunt's. We get about 5 feet when he says, "Hey kid, cute pajamas." My dad gripped my hand a little tighter and pulled me a tad forward, forcing me to keep stride. I was about to turn my head to look at the man, but my dad must have noticed because he told me to just keep walking. We make it to the edge of the sidewalk and have to wait for the light to change when I hear him again. "Hey kid, what you got there?" I felt my dad's hand get super tense. He leant down and picked me up, basically making sure I wouldn't leave his side. The man repeated again, "What you got there? I love Scooby-Doo." He then proceeded to make a harsh laughing sound in the voice of Scooby. You know, the high-pitched noise he does, sort of laugh. I dug my face into my father because I was scared. It was then after I was done burying my face into my father's shoulder that I saw the man a little clearer. He had what looked like pimples or scabs all over his face, a baseball hat shadowing most of his forehead and eyes, and a very large smile. Although I believe I remember him having what seemed like a scarred lip, or a cleft lip, I'm not sure. But I know there was something weird about his lips. I noticed only because of his enormous and awkward smile. It was after the light turned and allowed for us to continue walking across the street that the man reached out and brushed my hair. I recoiled away from him and dug my face into my father's shoulder once more. My dad noticed this and swung around, yelling at the man to get his effing hands off his son. He said some more things as well, most of which was language he didn't usually say around to me. I was terrified. The man slowly backed off. His hands were held up, a smile still plastered on his face. Still holding me, my dad quickly walks across the road and gets onto the other side. I looked up and the man was still standing there, smiling. After we had gotten to be what seemed like a safe distance, my dad asked me if he could put me down and we began to walk hand in hand again. We get about a block away from my aunt's home when amongst the usual sounds of traffic, I begin to hear quick and heavy footsteps behind us. My dad must have heard it too because he took me by the shoulder and moved both of us towards the building. From my understanding now, he must have just believed it to be a jogger out on the town. However, when I looked back, it was the man again, still smiling, hat covering his eyes. "Hey, you never told me what you got there, kiddo." My father had enough. He turned around, keeping me away from the man with a hand on my chest, and began to yell. I had never really heard my father yell like that. He is a smaller guy, maybe 5'9", but he is rather burly and built due to him being a diesel mechanic. The sound of his deep voice made me recoil and become even more worried. After using more profane language and telling the man to get lost, the man once more began talking. "I just love Scooby-Doo, man. I want to see if I could try on those PJs." That's what did it. My dad clenched up and laid the man out clean. No other words said. One punch and the man was down. Once my father saw that he wasn't getting up, he picked me up and basically ran the rest of the way to my aunt's home. He sat me down, explained to her what happened, and called the police, telling them there was a confrontation. I remember there being at least 2 cars with flashing lights that pulled up, but when I asked my dad about this story before writing this, he claims that they never updated him on whether they found the man or not. Needless to say, I still ended up staying at my aunt's place for a couple of days. I just remember that night, probably along with the following week, being absolutely terrified. We eventually ended up moving out of there, and my dad ended up marrying another woman. We moved into a quiet town where not a lot happens, and I am now in college. But after reading the famous Smiling Man story here, it triggered this story in my memory, and I had to go and ask my father about the blunt details of what happened that night. I'm going to sleep with my lights on tonight. I just want to start off by saying that to make this story easier to understand, I'm going to use a lot of dialogue. Obviously, this wasn't recorded, so these aren't the exact words of anyone involved in this experience. I'm just trying to tell it as best as possible, and I think it will benefit me and you if I use a lot of quotes. Just keep in mind, most of it is not direct. This might be a long one, so let's just get into it. I wrote this at 2 a.m. and I have corona, so I apologize in advance. This happened in 2015 when I was 16 and still living in my hometown. A forgotten little beach town in the middle of nowhere that's so remote, it's probably not even known by surrounding areas. Basically, there are 3 things you can do there as a teenager. Go to the movies, swim, or go to this pathetic little place called Miller's Fun Park. It's relatively similar to a lot of fun park type things, only a lot worse. There's a crappy arcade with broken skee-ball machines, batting cages that probably haven't been used since the early 80s, a pathetic mini golf course, and the most dangerous go-karts you've probably ever seen in your life. Seriously. Miller's Fun Park is on the edge of a field. On the opposite side of the field, about 3 miles down, is the beach, and across the single street are woods. If our town is in the middle of nowhere, Miller's is practically on the moon. Anyway, getting into the story. My cousin Emma and I decided one summer night that we wanted to go go-karting. It was around 10 p.m., so we knew it would almost be deserted, but that's the way we liked it. I picked her up from her house, and we made the long drive down. Once we had arrived and parked in the nearly empty lot, we hopped out of the car and paid for some go-karting tickets. The same people had worked there forever, I swear. There was nobody there except for a few boys in the arcade and a guy who looked to be in his 60s sitting on a bench near the batting cages. Emma and I paid him no mind, and we went to the go-kart track. Like I said, these carts were incredibly dangerous, so I was focused on nothing but making sure I wasn't going to skid and flip, as we raced way too fast around the windy track. This is why I didn't notice the guy walking over to the fence and why I didn't notice him watching us, until we pulled into the lanes after our last lap. He was standing on the other side of the fence right where I parked. He stared at me with the most unsettling expression, a creepy smile playing on his cracked lips, and his dark eyes gleamed. I managed to give an uneasy smile back, handed another ticket to the guy running the go-karts, who was obviously higher than a kite, and Emma and I went off again. This time I couldn't focus. The dude gave me the worst type of feeling. My eyes were constantly finding their way to the metal fence where he stood, unmoving and watching us every time we were in his view. And the thing that was bothering me the most was we only had bought 3 tickets. We were on our second to last run, and he was standing directly next to the exit gate. I was just praying he'd move before we were done. But of course, no such luck. Our last go came and went, and I had no choice but to pull in next to him, unbuckle my seatbelt, and get out of my go-kart. I glanced over at Emma a few feet away as I opened the exit gate to see if she was as scared as I was, but she didn't seem to notice as she bounced over and bragged about how she had beat me the last 2 games. I was barely listening. I opened the gate and the guy stepped in front of me just as I was leaving. "Hey there," he said. His voice was dry and smelled of smoke. "What are you cute girls doing all alone here?" he said. My eyes started over to Emma, who was looking at the dude with both confusion and annoyance. What?" she said, pushing past the gate so she stood beside me. "It's so late." His tone was as hungry as his eyes and reminded me of a snake even. "Your parents know you're out?" "Yeah," I answered quickly. "They're waiting for us. Actually, we need to get going." This was a lie and probably sounded like it from my tone, but I tried to push past him anyway. It didn't work. He grabbed my shoulder to keep me in front of him. "Nonsense. I saw you girls pull up alone." My heart dropped in my stomach. "You had? Are you heading out? Why don't I walk you to your car?" He starts inching towards me and I look to Emma for help. With one swift movement, she pulled me halfway behind her and started sizing the guy up. This was pretty dumb as we're both small, and though she's a few inches taller than me, neither of us is anywhere near his size. This guy clears 6'2" easily, but she doesn't seem to care. "Actually, we're just headed to the arcade," she said harshly. "Her boyfriend is going to meet us there." I did have a boyfriend at the time, but he definitely wasn't coming. He wasn't even in town, and I knew she knew this. The guy's face immediately changes and his smile disappeared, and he was now glaring down at me with a look of annoyance in his eyes. I felt myself start to cower. "Boyfriend," he says roughly. Emma didn't give me time to say anything. She grabbed my arm and tugged me behind her into the arcade. The boys from before had already left, and the usual girl who worked in there was nowhere to be found. Still, it felt safer than outside. We ran to the back and hid behind the claw machine. What the heck did we do? I left my phone in the car, I whisper shouted. There was no way I was going out there alone, and pothead go-kart guy had already disappeared into the small ticket shack. "I don't have mine either. I left it charging," she said, facepalming. "We're just going to have to make a run for it." "Are you crazy? He's probably waiting for us in the parking lot." "What about the guy who runs the go-karts? We could get him to walk us out," she said. I just shook my head. "He's as high as Mount Everest right now. I don't want to risk running all the way to the ticket stand for nothing." "Then we have no choice." She stood up, pulling me with her. "Let's go." I swallowed hard, wanting to cry. I'd never been that scared before. There was something so wrong about this dude. We made our way out of the arcade, looking around to see if he was nearby. The park was now absolutely deserted. Emma practically had to drag me to the exit. I was looking every direction every second, waiting for the guy to come out of the woods or something and pounce on us at any second, but he didn't. Everything was still. "Get your keys out," she instructed, and I pulled them from my pocket. We were about 20 feet from my car when I stopped dead in my tracks. "What?" she whispered. I stared at the car, keys in hand. I had never locked it. I never locked the car, Emma. "What?" "I didn't lock it." "What if—" I trailed off, but she knew what I was saying. She started inching towards the car, and I grabbed her arm to stop her, but she pulled away. "I'm just going to peek. If I say run, you run." Her voice is quiet. I nodded shakily. She eventually made it close enough to see inside, but by the way she was squinting, I knew it was too dark to make anything out. My heart was beating out of my chest. What if he's in there? Or what if we get in and he asphyxiates me like in the movies? All these thoughts almost drowned out the unmistakable sound of shoes slamming against the pavement. My head whipped around instantly, and there he was, sprinting at us at full speed out of the woods. I screamed bloody murder and broke for the car, jiggling the handle as I realized I had locked it. Emma was already on the other side, screaming at me to unlock it. I fumbled with the keys, but managed not to drop them as I unlocked the door, flung it open, and practically threw myself inside. I had just managed to close the door when he was there, slamming his fists against the window and shouting incoherently. I was sobbing at this point, and barely managed to lock the door as he went for the handle and yanked on it as hard as he could. Emma was screaming at me to go, and through my tears, I shoved the key in the ignition and flew into reverse. He was still chasing us and yelling as I veered backwards out of the lot and turned as fast as I could while slamming on the gas. I was driving like I was still in a go-kart, but I didn't care. I could barely see the road through the flood of tears, and Emma had to grab the wheel several times to keep us from crashing before I regained some composure. Though obviously shaken up, she'd managed to keep her tears in and be the sane one of the two of us as we drove at least 30 miles over the speed limit the whole way back to my house. We didn't tell either of our parents about this, and looking back I wish we had, because there was something seriously wrong with that guy. But we were too scared of what they might say or do. I think we thought they'd blame us somehow, so it stayed a secret between us, something even we didn't talk about until months after the horrifying encounter. Safe to say we never went back to Miller's Fun Park after that. I urge you all to be extremely careful when going out at night. And to the lunatic who tried to do who knows what to my cousin and me, I hope I never have to see you again. This happened to me a few years ago. I worked second shift at the time, getting off at midnight, and would sometimes hit up Denny's after work for a late night dinner. One night, I'm sitting in a booth reading my book and eating dinner when I look up and notice a guy at another table sitting by himself and looking at me. I didn't think much of it, since he could have just been people watching or something. We make eye contact and he looks away. A little while later, I look up and this guy is staring at me again. The same thing happens. Eye contact and he looks away. At this point, my instincts start to twig a bit, but he hasn't come over to me or anything, so I let it go. Finish eating and get up to pay at the register. He immediately gets up to pay right behind me. Now, I'm starting to get a little bit creeped out, so after I pay, I move over to the side and pretend to be looking for something in my purse. He lingers for a second, then leaves the building. I wait a few minutes to leave, cursing myself that I parked over at the side of the building instead of the windowed front. If this happened today, I'd probably ask an employee to walk me out, but I was young and didn't want to inconvenience anyone. I walk out to my car on high alert and get in. Suddenly, he pulls his car in next to mine and starts to get out. I'm really freaked out at this point, so I quickly hit my door locks and back out of my parking space. There are two ways to exit the lot. A driveway a few feet away going directly onto the service road, which would take me right past his car, or I can go around the building and cross over into the next door, Waffle House's parking lot, and exit through their driveway. I choose to go around the building, and this guy jumps back into his car and starts following me. I'm panicking now and don't know what to do. I don't want to go home as I don't know this guy, and I don't want him to know where I live. Now I would drive to the police station, but I didn't think of it at the time. Luckily, there's that Waffle House next door with a front wall full of windows and a parking space right in front. I pull into the spot, jump out of my car, and literally run into the building. I look back outside and see his car stop behind mine, and there's this just enraged look on his face. At this point, I'm shaking and nearly hyperventilating. The waitresses, and seriously bless them, ask me what's wrong, and I kind of stutter out that I think I'm being followed. One of the waitresses comes around the corner, stands next to me, and just stares down the car creep until he drives off. Then she sits me in a booth and gives me a cup of coffee, telling me to wait a while before heading home. I left about 20 minutes later, and I swear I watched every car on the road to make sure that guy wasn't following me. Never went back to that area after work again, though I did write a thank you note to the waitresses and dropped it off during the day. It scared the heck out of me, but to this day, the thing that makes me angry about it is after telling some friends what happened, a couple of them tried to convince me that he just thought I was cute and maybe wanted to talk to me. No. They didn't see this guy's face when I got to safety. He wanted to hurt me. Thankfully, he didn't get the chance. Before I start, I'd like to apologize because English is not my native language. I'm Swiss, and also I'm on mobile, so sorry for any spelling mistakes, bad formatting, or grammar mistakes. I'm currently 19 and this happened in 2013 or 2014. I'm not 100% sure. I was 14 or 15 at the time. I was on holidays with mom, my younger brother, and my grandmother, mother's side. We decided, since it was autumn and fall in Switzerland, to go to a warm country and choose Turkey for that. I wasn't used to the mentality of the Turks, so I was most of the time embarrassed when they talked to me. At least as long as I was outside of the holiday resort, at, for example, a market. When we were inside the resort, I never had problems. Everybody spoke English and was rather reserved as well, so more usual for me. Anyways, that was until dinner one night. Being Swiss, we decided before we went on holidays that we'd manage the tip for the staff differently, with Swiss chocolate. So, this evening comes. We are getting served in the resort's restaurant by a young Turkish waiter. He was very nice and always made comments to me. So, my grandma decided that it would be best if I give him his tip. Not in the mood to argue with my grandma, I did it. But that was a big mistake. He then asked for my number and promised me to text me right after his shift and blah blah blah. I politely said no thank you since I already had a weird feeling about him. My grandma gave him my number afterwards. Thanks, grandma. So, let the creepy thing start. He constantly texted me, demanding to know where I am and wanting to take me out to swim at the beach or show me his apartment. At this point, notable is that he was 19 and at the time 4 or 5 years older than me. I always said no and then decided to tell my mom about this. She just laughed it off together with my grandma as being cute and adorable. While he was getting creepier and creepier, he told me he loves me after just one day and told me that he'd moved to Switzerland for me since he has to do a workshop for being a waiter there and stuff like that. I started to notice that when I was at the pool in the resort, he'd stare at me from time to time. He even once ran after me and tried to kiss me. I swear, I thought my life was going to end when he ran towards me. As soon as we left the resort to head to the airport, I blocked him on WhatsApp. But the story isn't over here. He stalked me, literally. Found me on every social media site and texted me things from I love you to please unblock me. Calling me all kinds of names as well. Or I'm going to find you and hurt you as much as you hurt me. Just blocked him everywhere. And after a year of not hearing from him, I thought I'm alright. I wasn't. He somehow found my Skype, on which I used neither my real name nor my phone number, and sent me a picture of him at Lake Zurich. This is very close to where I live, stating, hey, I'd love to meet up. I miss you. I didn't go to the city for like 3 months. To all the people that are curious, yes, I told my mom and showed her the texts. Her response was pretty much, no big deal. He must be into you. And I am okay now. Got a new number and changed my looks a bit. also grew up. So this was back in college. I had joined one of those freshman Facebook groups before I got to school so that maybe I could meet a few friends before actually going to school. I posted and got like 6 friend requests. One of them we'll call Jill. I get to school and about the 5th day of class, Jill randomly messages me saying hi. Innocent enough, I messaged back. She then wanted to meet up after like 10 minutes of talking. It was college after all and she was cute, so why not? We meet up in front of an academic building and sit on the steps and just talk about this and that. What's your major? Where are you from? And normal stuff. Then the conversation lags and we sit there for a moment and then she slides really close to me and whispers, "Hey, if you have any tension you need to release, I'm here." Whoa. Yeah, some guys might be cool with that, but going from 0 to penetration in 30 minutes is a little fast for my taste. I awkwardly mumble thanks and say that I have to get going. Foolishly, we exchange numbers and part ways. Over the next few days, I get an absolute torrent of texts from her wanting to hang out, read sex. And it couldn't have been more of a turnoff for me. This was too much. I vowed to never stick my you-know-what crazy, and I was living by that motto. I told her several times that I'm not interested and considered blocking her number, but I had a dumb phone back then and you have to call Verizon up and go through a whole process that was time consuming, so I just settled for blocking her on Facebook and ignoring the texts. Then she started showing up at my dorm after class. I would tell her that I had to study and brush past her. I'd be in the cafeteria and get a text from her saying, "I see you, that red shirt looks good on you," and I'd whip around real quick to see where she is, but I wouldn't see her. Just really creepy stuff. She tapered off after a while, occasionally sending an apology text, which I also ignored. And then the next day, she'd send me a picture of a stack of condoms saying, "Look what I just found." Out of the blue one day, I get a crazy text from her saying, "Why don't you want to?" I ignore it like the usual. Nothing out of the ordinary from her, but then this came with a twist. She followed up with the, "I'm going to tell them you assaulted me." Stunned yet unmoved, I went to sleep. A few days later, I get a knock on my dorm door. I opened it and there are 2 campus police department officers standing there with my RA. They say, "Are you insert blank name here?" I'm not giving you guys my name. I say yes. They say, "You need to come with us." It was so embarrassing being let out by the police officers. Everybody in my dorm room was staring in silence at me. I sit down with the detective and my first sentence is this anything having to do with Jill? And the detective says yes. She's accusing me of you-know-what. I throw my hands up in the air and explain to them that she's crazy and what's been happening and that I haven't touched the girl, and I go to pull out my cell phone and show him the text, but I left my phone back at the dorm. I ask if I can retrieve it and he reluctantly says yes. He probably thought I was going to make a run for it, but I wasn't under arrest, so he couldn't keep me. I get the phone and come back an hour later and show him the text from her and the sheer volume of stuff that's been heading my way from her hand. He kind of eased up once he realized I might be telling the truth. He didn't even ask, "Where were you on the night of blank?" which I thought was a good sign. They bring her in for questioning and confront her with the text from my phone, and she broke down and confessed it was a false accusation. Guess what happened to her? Absolutely nothing. No fine, no probation. Nothing if you don't count a no contact agreement. My school's version of a PPO, basically. I was very upset at that, but was glad that this big ordeal was over. For the next few years after the order expired, she would call me from various numbers, make fake Facebooks, and try to talk to me, pretending to be a different Romanian girl or an Asian girl, and I would quickly call her out on her BS. Now I hear she's married, and I hope on all that is holy that we never meet again. This happened a good few years ago. Some context. I was in my early 20s, single and living by myself. Most of my family lived about a 4-hour drive away from me. I was working for a small call center that provided, among other things, phone services for a 24-hour plumbing company, so they needed somebody on the line at all times. My shift ran from 8 p.m. to whenever my boss showed up to pick up the line, which was usually around 6 a.m. I worked in a building that housed several businesses of the same sort. Call center work mostly, though we were the only one that had 24-hour services. Because of budget cuts, I was the only operator on my floor. The only people in the building at night were the security guy who came by to do his rounds twice a night and me. Now, because the line had to be on 24/7, I was never allowed to disconnect while I was there. I ran to and from the bathroom, ate meals sitting in front of the computer, and every once in a while sneaked a cigarette at the window within sight of the screen. Only the light above my computer was on. Everything else was turned off when everybody went away around 10 p.m., so I was left in this half darkness beneath the spotlight. I desperately needed that job to support myself, so despite that crap condition, I kept repeating that it wasn't that bad. Things were usually quiet after 10 p.m. I could use the extra hours on my paycheck and didn't need to get a second job. I did a lot of reading, and I even considered going back to school because if nothing else, the night shift would afford me plenty of time to study. So one night around 2 a.m. or so, I got a call. I introduced myself as I always did. "Hello, you're calling so-and-so. My name is Jill. How may I help you?" The guy on the other side repeated my name and hung up. Working phone services on the night shift, you certainly get used to a lot of weird stuff, so I shrugged it off and went back to my book. Then he called me again and asked if he was speaking to Jill. I said yes, repeated the company name and asked, "How may I help?" He hangs up. The third time around, he asked if this is Jill on the phone, and I asked to whom I'm speaking. He hangs up again. The next time he calls, he's breathing hard on the phone and tells me he wants me to talk to him and he's not going to hurt me. I jot down his phone number and I start hanging up whenever his call pops up, which was the better part of an hour. This went on for months when he realized I was hanging up every time I saw that number. He began calling from a restricted number, meaning I never knew if it was a legit call and ended up answering. All the time this guy keeps saying he wants me to talk to him and that he's not going to hurt me. The one time I counted, I hung up on this guy over 200 times in one night. Every time he would call, I'd say the company name and as soon as I heard him, I hung up. I complained to my boss and she did nothing. Instead, she laughed the whole thing off because this guy obviously didn't know where I was and he was only a voice on the line and I was perfectly safe. Sometime into this, I started talking to coworkers and here's where it started getting really creepy. He never called on my days off, when somebody else would be covering my shift. Indeed, at one point I changed shifts with a coworker to attend the wedding, and he didn't call that day. As time went by, I was getting pretty spooked by the whole situation and the fact my boss did zero to try and stop this. My coworkers were sympathetic and told me that if my boss did nothing, I should file a complaint myself, but I'm not sure I could since this wasn't happening on my personal number. None of them could really walk me home since I was the only operator on the night shift. Everybody else was gone by the time my boss arrived and I left the office. I got a little bit paranoid because obviously this guy knew my schedule pretty well and even if I changed shifts, he would only call if he knew I was on the line. It had to be somebody who could see me. I started doing the commute with my cell phone in hands at all times, with the emergency number dialed in. Sometimes I did the whole commute on the phone with friends or relatives to keep calm. Since it's illegal to carry pepper spray here, at one point I considered walking around with a box cutter in my purse. That's how afraid I was. One day before my shift started, I was at the entrance of the building smoking a cigarette before going up, and I saw the security guy come by. The same fellow who usually did the night shift. This huge guy. I didn't really know him, never spoke much to him, only said good evening or goodbye when I went by his desk and whenever he came to my floor to do his rounds. I usually kept to myself and I never really made small talk or anything. I just greeted him out of politeness and he greeted back. He asked for a light, so I gave him my lighter and he told me he'd been fired and he was going home. And he went on to tell me that he always got the impression I was afraid of him since I was never friendly or welcoming. His exact words. Then he told me he was never going to hurt me and just walked away. I lost every drop of blood I had in me. I went inside to tell my boss the whole thing and discovered the guy got fired for harassing women on other floors, going as far as trying to corner somebody in one of the elevators. The complaints piled up and he lost his job. Most of the time, his shifts matched mine, so he would see me come in at 8 p.m. and left before I did. I asked my boss for that phone number again to come forward on this guy and asked the security company if that was his number. She told me she threw it away. When I told her the whole story, she found it cute. Then she asked me if I was sure it was him because a voice on the phone is different and maybe you got it wrong. Quality assurance told us time and time again that our every call was recorded, so I demanded recordings. That's when I found out that again, because of budget cuts and whatnot, the night shift was never recorded, so I had no evidence. Once the guy was fired, the call stopped. I didn't work there for much longer after that. So I work for a very major retailer you've all heard of. This was from a year and a half or so ago, back when I worked in the electronics and photo departments. One afternoon I answered the phone and spoke to a customer. He wasn't very direct about what exactly he was looking for. At first, he said he was looking for a gift for a family member that he hated. He said he wanted it to be something they would accept because of the obligation, but would absolutely hate. I asked if he was looking for a type of gag gift, and he dodged my question. Instead, he started asking me what I would buy if I wanted to get a gift for a family member like that. I said I wasn't sure, but maybe a movie or some music they didn't like would be a good choice. Then he surprised me by asking what type of movies I liked watching. I said it wasn't anything that would really fit what he was looking for, as I usually watch anime. Next, he asked if that was something I'd want to watch over dinner. I said I certainly do watch it while I eat dinner sometimes, not knowing where he was going with this. Then he said, "No, I meant with me." I laughed nervously and told him no. Then I quickly changed the subject back to what he was looking for, and he asked me if we had a certain TV series in stock. I told him I would go check. By this point, I was feeling pretty weird, but I wanted to keep my customer service and not disappoint the customer by being rude. So I found what he was looking for and then told the price and how many copies were in stock. After this, he asked me some other question about myself, and I told him that perhaps I wasn't the best person to help. So I handed the phone off to a male coworker. I walked away from the desk at that point and made my way back to the photo department where I felt safer, as I wasn't in the direct view of customers who were walking around. I took a moment to collect myself before I left. This next part was of my coworker's interaction with the customer on the phone. My coworker introduced himself in the usual manner and asked how he could help. The man said, "Oh man, where'd that cute bubbly girl go?" My coworker replied with an improvised response of, "Oh, she's actually our photo associate. She doesn't know as much about electronics." To which the customer responded with, "Oh, I like to see some pictures of her naked." To which my coworker did not know how to respond. The customer then said it would be easier just to shop in person and that he would be back later to see me, and hung up. I asked my coworker if he was ever able to get the customer off the phone, and he told me about what the customer said, and I felt sick. I was also so terrified of coming into contact with this customer that I went to management and reported the issue to management. They chuckled and said there wasn't anything they could do, as it was likely just a prank caller. I was worried about spending any time on the sales floor, but I still had to complete my shift. That evening I was terrified. I politely asked a male coworker to walk me to my car, and he obliged. And we saw no trace of the creepy guy anywhere, and I've never heard from him ever since then. So, I don't know if it's a good idea to post this on Reddit. I'm a bit paranoid. What if he's on here? That would be a bummer. Anyways, English is not my first language, so please bear with my possibly very horrid grammar. About a week ago, this random dude added me on Facebook out of nowhere. I didn't recognize the name or the picture at all, and I was slightly confused. I don't usually have random people adding me like that. I had been at a party the weekend before though, so I just figured it was somebody I'd met there and simply didn't remember. Needless to say, I wasn't alarmed at all. It's like that nowadays anyway. People add each other after having just met once, you know. Anyways, it didn't take long for this person, I'll call him Albert, to start chatting with me. This is our very first conversation. Albert: "Hi." "Hello, who are you?" Call me rude, but I honestly couldn't remember him. "You're cute," with a smiley face. "Okay, thanks I guess, but do I know you?" "Maybe." I stopped answering then, since I didn't feel like playing games right at that moment. I have a boyfriend, and I was not having any of that mysterious flirty guy stuff. The next day I woke up and saw he liked all of my profile pictures I'd ever had. 15 pictures. He had liked some of my statuses as well. That was a bit disturbing. I know it's not a crime to go looking through someone's Facebook pictures and all, but it was still a bit weird of him to go ahead and like all of them. He wrote again that day. "Hey, what's up?" "Hi, I'm reading. What about you?" "Looking at you." Okay." Note: I use a lot of smileys. I never really want to come across as rude. You could say I'm a bit timid, even when I really should tell people what I think. I can really relate to Bilbo in The Hobbit when all the dwarves just storm into his home and eat all of his food. "You are really cute with brown hair, you know." "Thanks, I guess. See, you liked all my pictures." "Yes, I did." Okay, so I know this is probably something a lot of people have experienced. Random creepy Facebookers liking all. Random creepy Facebookers being all stalky like that, but what happened next was extremely unsettling. I was getting a bit irritated and decided to stalk him back. His profile had just recently been created, about a week before this happened, and his profile picture was low quality and very small. I did not recognize the man in the picture one bit. Profile said he was from the same town as me and that he was a couple of years older than I am. We had no mutual friends. In fact, I was the only friend he had. I did not like this at all. I decided to confront him about it. So who are you really? Why am I the only person on your friends list? He stared out the window and I saw Albert typing, but he never sent me anything. I waited for about an hour and then I wrote again. Seriously, I'm going to remove you from my Facebook now. Wait, can we meet? He said. I'd rather not. Why? I don't know you. You're pretty creepy, to be honest. Can't you just tell me who you are? I can show you. And then he sent me a picture of his you-know-what. I removed him from my contact list and told my boyfriend about it. He told me not to worry about it and that it was probably just someone pranking me. I decided to let it go. A few days passed and nothing happened. I had almost forgotten the guy when I got a text from an unknown number yesterday. It read, "I have your number, by the way." I remembered what had happened and I figured it must have been Albert. At first, I wondered how the heck he'd gotten a hold of my number, but then I figured he'd taken it from an old Facebook status where I wrote about having a new number and that everybody should replace the old one. I was hanging out with a couple of friends when I got the text, and even though I was alarmed and a bit irritated, I didn't pay it much mind. That's until he sent me a picture. It was a picture of my house. Well, my window to be exact. I live on ground level in a small apartment building in the middle of town. Therefore, I always have my curtains down whenever I'm at home. So, he could have actually seen me inside of my flat, but the thought of him knowing where I live still creeped me out. Needless to say, I cringed when I saw the picture, and my friends asked me what was wrong. I showed them the text and told them about him. They got really worried and told me I could sleep over at one of their places that night. I agreed. I sent him a very angry text basically telling him to kindly screw off. Today when I got home, I had to go home eventually, right? He left a very unpleasant surprise for me. As I grabbed my door handle, I realized it was all wet. There was a puddle beneath it, as if somebody had poured some kind of liquid on it. Confused, I looked closer at it, in my hand. I then smelled it and realized it was semen. It was so gross. I took off my hat and wiped my hand on it. Then I took a picture of the handle and the puddle underneath it. Guess I wanted proof. Then I wiped that off as well. I then rushed in and cleaned my hands several times before calling my boyfriend. He's staying here tonight. This is really freaking creepy. What do I do? The police probably wouldn't even help. Picture it. Hometown 2003. I was 25, a year out of college, working my first grown-up job, and I'd been living alone in my apartment for about 6 months when I arrived home to find my phone ringing. I missed the call, checked the caller ID, and didn't recognize the number. The area code was from my old college town about an hour away. I went about my business, but within a couple of minutes, the same number called again. "Hey girl, how are you? It's been such a long time." "Hi, who is this?" "Girl, it's Mandy. What are you up to?" I knew 4 Mandys. None lived in College Town. None of them called me girl all the time. None sounded like a valley girl on uppers. Mandy who? "Oh my gosh, we have so much to catch up on. So you moved back to your hometown. That's great. Where are you working? Are you still dating that guy from our high school? I so thought y'all would end up together. How are your parents? Where do you live? What are you up to tonight?" Wait, this was a 5th Mandy. Mandy Jones from high school. I mean, we'd been friends when we took dance in elementary school, but we'd been long since lost touch. Why in the world would she be calling me now? I didn't feel right. Hey, yeah, so I'm working at a local business in my hometown. What are you up to?" He said. "Oh, that's great. I always knew you'd be somebody. So, where do you live now? And are you still dating that guy?" Weird. I had one boyfriend in high school. He attended a different school, and we broke up after a couple of months. Hardly a love story for the ages. "So, this is Mandy who again?" "Girl. Mandy. Come on now." And she continues blathering on, asking all kinds of personal questions, which I keep dodging. She kept wanting to know where I lived. Answering hometown wasn't enough, and what about the cute guy from school? "Okay, look, I don't know who you are, and I have no idea how you got this number." She repeated her name and said, "Mandy Roper." "Girl, I know it's been a while, but you should know that. We played volleyball together. We wrote this number in my yearbook, and I just came across it and thought we should catch up." All the red flags here. A few things you should know about Mandy Roper. 1. She sounds less like a chirpy valley girl and more like somebody who started smoking a pack a day at age 4. 2. While we did play volleyball and softball and all the other balls together, I guarantee that if you asked her, Mandy would tell you that we played basketball together. Mostly because 3. Basketball is the main reason Mandy Roper hated my guts. I was one of a handful of freshmen on the varsity team and, within 2 weeks of joining the team, had made an enemy of the scariest bitch on the team. It's a very, very long, silly teenage girl drama story that isn't relevant to the rest of this tale. Just keep in mind that Mandy would rather have told me to go screw myself with a rusty spork than have tea and chat. Anyway, 4. I got that number when I moved into my apartment 6 months prior, so I couldn't have given it to her in high school. So I told Mandy Roper as much. Me, you don't sound like Mandy Roper. I couldn't have given you this number in high school because I've only had it a few months and Mandy Roper hates me. She is the last person who would ever give a crap about what I'm doing right now. Who is this really? Silence on the phone. Seriously, who are you? F you, she said. Over the next week, maybe 2, I had several hang-ups at my office and a rose was left on my doorstep that my then boyfriend denied having left. I was literally clueless about stalking and harassment and whatnot, so I wasn't really sure what to do. After it seemed the hang-ups weren't going to stop, I called the friend who still lived in our college town and asked her cop husband what to do. He took the number and looked it up for me and then called the house. The most he could figure out is that it was a little old lady that lived alone and seemed thoroughly confused by the whole story and swore nobody else could have used her phone. My dear, dear friend Mandy must have been somebody close to little old lady though, because all of it stopped after he made that call. It wasn't until years later that I realized why somebody chose to pretend to be Mandy Roper. We'd played volleyball together one single year, and it just so happens that we were seated to one another in the team photo in the yearbook. We were both smiling in that picture. We'd simply gotten used to ignoring each other by then. So, somebody got their hands on an 8-year-old yearbook from someone I went to school with, looked me up, picked the person sitting beside me in a team photo, then called me and harassed me for a couple of weeks. I sit here 14 years later, still unclear on the who, what, when, where, why, and how, but Mandy Roper, please stay away. My boyfriend John and I went to hang out with his best friend named Mike and his current girlfriend. She knew about a party that was going on with some of her childhood friends who had just finished high school. We arrived to the middle of nowhere, a bunch of people hanging out in the front yards of a few homes, drinking beer and just hanging around. It was very strange to me and we felt out of place. People were whispering about us and pointing us out. I assumed because it was a small town where everybody knew each other. Some other boys started mocking my boyfriend's shirt. "You're a rich boy, huh? Think you're better than us or something?" My boyfriend was not rich and got a lot of hand-me-downs from his boss after he gained a few pounds, but we just laughed it off. After a little bit of just standing around, somebody decided that we were going to go to a friend's house who had a pool. We all followed, thinking someone's actual home might be less strange than just hanging out in random front yards. When we arrived there are some girls in the pool fully clothed. They seemed nice enough, just drunk. Some people are hanging outside in the driveway. I have a prosthetic leg, so I get tired if I stand up too long. I sit on the back of a truck. After a while, a dude approaches us and sits down next to me. I was pretty naive at the time and never received much attention from the opposite sex. Grew up in a small town in a different state. We were in Georgia, I grew up in Texas. The dude started telling us how he was from New York and asking me questions about my life. It was then that he put his hand on my knee and made a comment about my looks, saying I was cute or whatever. My boyfriend was there and I felt safe enough to not react, but my blood was boiling. I shrugged off his comments and laughed it off. I tried to act uninterested, but I was frozen in an uncomfortable state of weirdness. I had no idea where John's friend Mike was, much less his girlfriend, who actually might know these people. John is watching, waiting for me to say something, which I didn't. I don't know why, I didn't like the attention. The dude was not attractive and didn't seem like a fun or a cool guy, just an obvious drunk creep. His hand started moving up my thigh and I said something like, "Yeah, not interested, that's my boyfriend right there." He said, "Oh, well, that's okay. He doesn't seem to mind." His hand was moving further up my leg when my boyfriend grabbed him by the throat and said, "Get your hands off her." He started to get scared and was apologizing when somebody ran out of the woods and tackled my boyfriend. It was the owner of the home. He had been passed out in his truck for the past 4 hours, but had come to in time to see a complete stranger choking out his friend. 3 guys ran up on him and he managed to fight 2 of them off, but the host of the party had him in a headlock. He held him until he almost lost consciousness. They fell to the ground with the host on top of him pressing down on his throat and cutting off his ability to breathe. I tried to hit him and beat him off, but he had a glazed over look in his eyes and seemed determined to kill him. I laid into him, digging my prosthetic knee into his back. John's friend was nowhere to be seen. The party host finally let off of him and we ran to our car. Ike and his girlfriend were close behind, obviously aware of what was happening the whole time. The next morning, the whites of John's eyes were all red and full of blood, and he almost died. I really believe that. We decided to go to the cops. This was in a place called Rockdale County, a backwards, nasty country town. I didn't realize how terrible it was until we were inside the sheriff's office. They claimed that they had gotten a report that I had taken my leg off and beaten people with it, which is not physically possible. They said the only way we could press charges was if we went to jail because it was all hearsay. And the cop knew the attacker, family friends, and they would never assault someone unless they deserved it. We had to walk away. Rewind this time to the year 2002. I was in a residential nationwide high school, which is in Washington, D.C., and everybody knows that D.C. or any other major city can be dangerous. I was invited to visit one of my friends home for spring break. I met with some local students, boys, and all of them were cute. They invited me a night out with them, and one of the boys borrowed his mom's van. He wanted to go cruising around Phoenix and show me the sights. I was the only girl in the group of boys. There were 9 of us hunkered down in an old Dodge white van. One of the guys had a brilliant idea of doing drive-by egg throws, so they got eggs and kept the van door open as they tossed eggs at pedestrians. This wasn't what got us in trouble. After all of our dozen eggs were tossed, we shut the van door and were getting ready to go home, and this is when stuff went down. I was sitting in the back of the van when we were at a red light. Then a silver Honda Accord pulled up alongside us. I saw 2 men in the car kept looking at us, and immediately one of them rolled down the window and actually showed his gun and was saying something that we couldn't understand. The light turned green, and the boy driving his mom's white Dodge van tried unsuccessfully to dart ahead or even dodge, and that wasn't happening with 9 high school students in the van. We were chased by this silver Honda Accord. We tried slowing down and speeding up and making quick turns, but no luck. Their Honda Accord was easily able to keep up, and it wasn't helping that the streets were empty. We ended up accidentally cornering ourselves when we pulled into a water reservoir entrance that had a dead end. 2 guys came out of their Honda, the headlights shining into our eyes, and they had guns. I mean real guns. They had 2 each and were using bandanas on their shaved heads. They were surprised by how many people came out of the van and were even more surprised that we were all deaf and were signing. They realized that we weren't throwing up gang signs at them. They just said, "My bad," and left. Being deaf saved my life. Recently, I moved out of my apartment. I simply had to because I didn't feel safe with my landlords. I lived in this really nice Dumbo apartment in Brooklyn for a few months with my roommate, who paid for most of the rent since her parents are super rich. Our landlords were actually this seemingly really sweet couple who lived a few floors above with their kids. The first few weeks were somewhat normal, except for the fact that every time I saw their kids in the elevator, they would scream at me before they got off and just run away. I thought it was really funny and cute at first, but then their eldest son came to visit and started doing the same thing, and he looked about my age. I didn't really think much of it since maybe he was just playing with his younger siblings. Shit got really weird when I bumped into all of them together and we talked for a bit. Out of nowhere, while we were having a pleasant conversation, the dad apologized to me, saying that his son might act strange because, he's a idiot. I was pretty shocked with him saying that out of the blue. I paused for a bit and I can't really remember what I said, but I just remember just wanting to get the heck out of this conversation now. A few days later, I bumped into the dad again in the lift. I was pretty standoffish, and he was just talking about how great my apartment is and how much of a generous guy he is for giving such a low rate. Then he asked if I could babysit his kids, as he and his wife and his eldest son would be at dinner. I said no at first, but he counteroffered, saying he'd pay $150 an hour, and being the greedy idiot that I am, I agreed. This is where I screwed up. When I got to his place, I was speechless. His apartment wrapped around the entire floor of the building. It was the nicest apartment I will ever see, that's for sure. About an hour and everything was normal. I was playing some fighting game with his kids when we suddenly heard the front door slam. I told them to stay there as I peeked to see what was going on, and I saw the dad falling all over the place, clearly drunk. He started walking towards me at the last minute, fell face first into the couch. I must have popped a blood vessel trying to hold in my laughter. I asked if he was okay and walked over to assist him. He then turned around, looked at me and said, "My wife will let us, please." When I tried asking, what his wife did was walk up to me, thanked me, paid me, and told me to come back another time. I just kind of went back to my apartment in shock, wondering what the heck just happened, and I definitely wasn't going back. I told my roommate, and she told me that she also bumped into the dad, and he told her, "My wife is cool, just so you know," with no explanation, and just left. At this point, we knew that we sure as heck were not renewing our lease. We didn't see our landlords until our final month. We kind of joked to our friends about how our landlords were creepy cucks. The next time I saw them was actually with my boyfriend, who was well aware of what they were trying to do. It was an intensely awkward elevator ride, as when they saw us in there, they just went quiet and smiled and nodded at us repeatedly. As we step out of the elevator, the dad shouts, "Hey," to us, and winks at me as the door closed. After that, I asked my boyfriend to stay with us for the remainder of our lease because at this point, my roommate and I were freaked the heck out. Our final and creepiest encounter was a few days before moving out. Our roommate walked out of the apartment and both the landlords were sitting in front of the elevators waiting for us. She said they started sobbing when they saw her and then begged us to stay. They apparently apologized for making us uncomfortable and said they thought we were the pretty young girls they were waiting for. She didn't say a word to them and got on the elevator and called me to warn me they were outside. And then they started to knock. My boyfriend answered and said when the guy saw him, he asked if I was here. Of course my boyfriend said no, but they tried walking in anyway. I walk out of my room saying I'll call the police if they don't leave, and they beg me to not and run out the apartment. A few days ago, we get a text from a random number saying we could live there for 6 months free if we just gave them a few nights. Of course, blocked and deleted. The whole thing was such an uncomfortable experience living there all those months, especially knowing they had keys to our apartment. This happened when I was 14. I was in middle school. The school was about 10 minutes away by car. My parents worked out an arrangement with our neighbor Jake, who was the same year as me. I think Jake was a normal kid. Our friend groups didn't overlap, so we didn't really see each other at school aside from carpooling. I don't remember the exact arrangement, but basically my parents would drop us both off at school together, and Jake's mom would pick us up. Jake was usually pretty quiet in the car. His mom was very chatty. I had no issue with that. She always wanted to know what was going on at school. I wasn't going to share all the gossip with her, but I told her generally things like how we had a spring play, how there was a science fair, and stuff like that. I would have about 10 minutes of conversation with her, and we would get back to the apartment complex where we lived. Then one day things got weird. Jake was sitting in the back seat that day. I was sitting in the front. His mom said, "I think you and Jake would make such a cute couple. You should be his girlfriend." I didn't know what to say to that. I think I mumbled something like, I don't know about that, and stared out the window trying to act like it wasn't happening. Why was she bringing this up? She didn't really know me and I barely even knew Jake. I didn't say anything more in the car. I remember just feeling a really weird awkwardness in the air. I didn't even turn to make eye contact with Jake. Figured he was probably just as uncomfortable as I was. When my parents came home that evening, I told them. My mom and dad kind of laughed it off. This hadn't been a serious violation. It wasn't as if Jake's mom had hit me or anything like that, but my parents said I shouldn't carpool with Jake anymore. I think my dad's exact words were, "You don't need to be around that." I didn't want to tell anyone at school about this. This wasn't Jake's fault, and I didn't want to make him feel bad or embarrassed by saying anything to him or go around telling people about it. I kept quiet on it. I stopped carpooling with him though, but I didn't tell anyone at school or anyone else. I barely saw Jake at school and we just walked past each other when I did. But that wasn't the end of it. After that, Jake's mom started showing up in places where I would be. I used to go to the park on Saturdays to play frisbee. Now I would see Jake's mom there. She would smile at me. She caught on to how I went there every Saturday morning, and she'd come every Saturday morning. I had previously never seen her there before. There were other examples like that. Also, Jake's mom showed up to the nail salon I went to. I had never seen her there before, but I saw her twice the same month after we stopped carpooling. Maybe this was all a coincidence, but I know it wasn't deep down. One day, she came up to me at the library and said something like, "It's so nice to see you here. I bet Jake would love it if you come over to visit sometime soon. You two should hang out more." I didn't know what to say. All I could do was give this awkward smile and mumble something like, "Yeah, sure, maybe." Eventually, I had to tell my parents about this. They had a talk with Jake's mom and told her to leave me alone, and that was the end of it as far as I know. It was just a really weird situation. From that point onward, we'd almost never see each other. I hope that means she stopped paying attention to me. I work at an outdoor mall in a great neighborhood. You would assume that it's safe as hell to be here, but then again, you just can't be sure anymore. There are creepy people everywhere, and I just can't help shaking the feeling that this isn't my last encounter with this man. I'm 19 years old, and I work at a kiosk that sells all kinds of wonky jewelry. It's usually teens, young adults, and occasionally some older adults that shop with us. Every once in a while, this man comes up to the kiosk, easily recognizable. Same leather jacket, crinkled corners of his eyes, one front tooth shorter than the other, and the same slouched way of walking. He is usually harmless, but wow, the last few times he's come by have made me feel so weird. I greet every customer with, "Hey, can I help you find anything?" And most of them say they're just looking. He always smiles at me and says, "Just looking, darling." At first it was fine, I didn't care at all. He seemed like a harmless 50 or so years old man. He always spent a very long time looking at the display and never bought anything. Most of the time I'm working the night shift at the kiosk while I'm surrounded by other shoppers and other kiosk workers. Mine is kind of all by itself in between two empty ones in the back. The mall sales have been going downhill the last few years, and I'm usually left alone, minus the friendly security woman that stops and chats with me on her rounds. She comes by every 30 minutes or so, and she's one of the few friends I have at work. The only stores in my view are a Reebok and a Macy's. A few nights ago, I was sitting at my kiosk bored out of my mind, and the security lady had already continued on her way. I had scrolled through Reddit already and was getting ready to open up Netflix and continue watching Terrace House when I heard footsteps coming up. I look up to see the creepy man staring at me, but not actually at the kiosk yet. I wave at him and he gives a little smile, but one that sends chills down my spine. A customer walks up and I immediately jump at the chance to help him, trying to shake the creepy feeling I had. After I had checked out the customer and written down the receipt, I glanced up to see the man still staring at me. Before I could say anything, he started walking over, taking my eye contact as permission to come join me. "Evening, darling," he said, almost doing a bow. "Good evening," I told him. He proceeded to do his usual, checking the display, not buying anything. Instead of walking around the cart, he stayed by the register where I was. He walked behind my chair to check the size, but never went where he couldn't see me. Then he started asking questions like we were longtime friends. "So, you got a boyfriend?" Kind of threw up at that because I've been single for over a year now, and I told him no, I didn't. But there was a checkout girl I found pretty damn cute at my local grocery store. "I see," he said. "Do you have any plans after work?" he asked. I was getting uneasy at this point, but I told him yes, I was going to a party. "So are you going to hook up with any of the boys there?" he asked. My jaw dropped. Whether or not I was doing that was in no way any of his business, and I told him no. He smiled a little bit and said, "Good, you're way too pretty for them anyway." He faced me again and came up to hug me. Till this point, I hadn't realized my heart rate was increasing, and it would only become apparent after I found it harder to breathe. Before I could actually do so, Linda, the security woman, walked up and glared at him. "Sir, if you're not going to be buying anything from this young woman, I suggest that you go loiter somewhere else." He stiffened at the sound of Linda's voice. She's a very intimidating woman, and he left. "You alright, honey?" she asked me. I shrugged. "He's always in here," I told her. She shook her head. "Let me and Russ walk you out to your car after work, alright?" I nodded, relieved that she offered without me having to ask. The rest of my shift is fine. I get through it and manage to make my bosses a bit of money. At 10 o'clock on the dot, Linda and her boyfriend Russ are at my kiosk. They wait for me to pack up my purse and then walk me to my little Prius. They wait for me to drive away as well. On my way to the party, I stop by a gas station to fill up the tank. As I'm waiting for it to fill, I glance over and see the man from the mall at the mini-mart. He's buying a pack of cigarettes and he looks out the window and sees me. When he does, he smiles and waves, holds up one finger asking me to wait a minute. I obviously don't. I yank out the fuel hose and jump in my car, booking it out of there. I take several detours before arriving 30 minutes late to the party. I had to make sure I would lose him before showing up there. It's been a few nights since that happened, and the only reason I'm writing now is because I'm actually working the morning shift and I just saw him walk out of the Macy's across from me. Linda has somebody biking around this half of the mall, so he won't come near me today. But please keep me in your thoughts, guys. So this happened a few years ago, and honestly is the reason I'm so much more cautious when I'm out and about nowadays. As in, keys between my fingers past 6 p.m. if I'm alone, and spray deodorant in my bag if I can fit it. As well as occasionally carrying a craft knife in my bag as well. Also sorry if this story is long. I kept trying to shorten it, but felt it left out too many details and frankly, writing out was kind of a bit of a release to me. I never spoke about it in detail with anybody. My parents and sister know the rough outlines, but not the details of what happened, I don't think. I had an interview in the city center, and I had met up with a couple of girlfriends afterwards. I was dressed nicely, a white blouse and a black cardigan, black trousers, not jeans, and some cute kitten heels. It had been raining, and so I was quite damp. You can fill in the blanks. Looked like the results of a wet t-shirt contest or a car wash gone wrong. My parents had to go home, so I hopped on the bus that stopped essentially right outside of my house. It was late, maybe like 4 p.m. and in summer, so it was still light out and had stopped raining by now. I sat at the back of the house where you usually have 9 seats, 4 facing backwards, 5 facing forwards, so that the heat from the engine of the shitty old bus could warm me up a little bit. This guy Frank was already sitting there, but he was tucked away in a corner and I had headphones in, so I assumed he wouldn't talk to me or was harmless, but I was incorrect. As soon as the bus took off, Frank shuffled over next to me and said something. I took an earphone out and asked him what he said, and he basically said, "Hey, how's it going? What have you done today, Missy?" I replied politely and started putting my headphones back in, but he started talking again. This time he introduced himself and reached out to shake my hand. I gave him a fake name. "Thank you, parents, for teaching me about quick thinking and hammering it into my skull," and shook his hand. He wouldn't let go for like a solid minute and was very clearly staring at my cleavage before I even said my name. I pulled my hand away and he puts his hand on my thigh. This is where I should have got the bus driver involved or at least moved seats. Guess what? I did neither of these things. We talked for about 5+ more minutes. I think the physical touch sort of sent me into a minor shock, to be honest. I froze. He was asking me who I live with or would anybody be home when I get home. I lied and told him my butch as shit girlfriend would be waiting for me as she cooked dinner for me. I was super single, but he didn't need to know that. As all creepy old men on buses do, he started asking about our relationship. How long have we been together? Would we get married? Do we want kids? Would we need a donor? The usual stuff, really. While he was asking all this stuff, a young guy, Sam, who was maybe my age at the time, had gotten on the bus, made eye contact with me and sort of half smiled, then went to the top deck. So after Frank asked me, somehow line-crossing question of, "Will your girlfriend be waiting for you in the shower?" I stood up, told him I'd recognized a friend going upstairs, and practically ran up the stairs to the top deck where I explained everything to Sam. He let me sit by him in case Frank came upstairs after me. The question was line-crossing for me. I think because of the way he stared at me when he said it. I vividly remember him licking his lips and clearing his throat and everything. It was insane. I got home about 5 minutes after going upstairs. Frank was thankfully no longer on the bus. When I got into the house, nobody was home. My parents and sister were all out elsewhere, and I tried calling them all, but nobody answered. So I cried and shook and threw up, alone, for almost 2 hours. I was a shaky mess even when they got home, and had nightmares for weeks and saw him everywhere I went. Although when I would check, he definitely wasn't there. I never saw him again actually, and wrote in a report to the bus company. I think telling them the day and rough time I was on the bus, where I was sitting, and roughly what he and I looked like. I honestly got the creeps just writing about this, even though I've written about it briefly in an Ask Reddit comment in the past. As a teen, there was a place that a lot of people my age used to go to. It was basically a large park, and we would all spend our weekends sat there getting drunk. Underage drinking was our stuff in the area, and there'd be about 40 people from all over the town at the park. Close to the park was a pub and a small shop. I and a couple of my friends used to sneak into the pub to use the toilet because no girl likes having to be outside. It was a Friday, and it was about 9 p.m. It was pitch black, and I'd been drinking. And I needed a wee, so I walked to the pub. I just come out of the pub, and a young couple, about 24 maybe, came over talking to me, asking why I was in the pub because I was obviously too young. I told them that I was just using the bathroom. What of it? Expecting them to have a go at me. But they didn't. They were very nice and started asking me about myself, telling me I was beautiful and things like that. The woman kept stroking my hair, saying I was lucky to have such nice long hair. Now, I thought this was odd, but I was drunk and thought, screw it. They're just a drunk couple being nice. Anyway, the female suddenly said, "Wait here," and they both went into the shop at the side of the pub. I thought about taking off, but by that point, a few of my friends had started walking up from the park and were heading towards me, so I waited. The couple came out with a bag of things for me and thrust it into my hand, saying, "Hey, we got you some things. You deserve them." Inside was a bottle of WKD, a 10-pack of 6, a Kinder Egg, a huge pack of crisps, and a bat and ball set for kids. It was so awkward, but I said thank you anyway, and by that point, my mates were around me asking who the couple were. They said they needed to go, but smiled, hugged me, and said if I wanted more, I should come back next week on my own. Now, despite having a good time drinking and eating, and then playing drunken bat and ball with my friends later, I realized how odd this encounter was. I didn't think too much about it though and just forgot about it. I did see them, but never actually went over to them. I thought they were weird, but week after week, I'd see them hanging around the outside pub area, always looking like they were just hanging out there. I ended up getting grounded for something and couldn't go out for a month. When I did finally get back out and went to the park, there was all sorts of gossip from the other groups at the park, talking about a girl who had been forced into a threesome with a couple that she had met in the area. I never met the girl, but the story was that she met this nice couple who bought her things and ended up offering her a ride home, but they didn't take her home. Apparently, they threatened her with things like telling her parents that she had been doing bad things, and since they painted the picture of being this lovely young couple, I can only imagine how they manipulated her. I haven't thought about this in years. It happened when I was 15. I'm now nearly 25. It was only reading through some of the stories on this subreddit that it actually came back to me, and it makes me sick to my stomach how I put myself in that situation, and how very lucky I am that nothing happened to me. I am always wondering how the girl is doing. As far as I know, she never told the police or anything. This happened literally last week at my new job that I've only been at for a week as a barista at a regional coffee chain. I was working a 6-hour shift. When around 10 o'clock, a customer came in and ordered our smallest coffee, sat down at a table that gave him a full view behind the counter and into our back kitchen and employee space. Originally, this customer seemed nice. I even forgot he was there as we were quite busy. However, as soon as there was a shift change a few hours later, my manager left to run some errands and would be back later, and another employee started with me. The customer no longer became as nice and polite. Immediately, he came up to me for a refill on his coffee and specifically tipped me a large amount and said that it was because of how cute and sweet I was. As I continued to work, he continued to try and talk to me nonstop, giving me very graphic information about his life, including how his elementary school was one of the last few in the area to desegregate while making not too friendly eye contact with my black coworker. I would just continue to ignore him and say, uh-huh, and oh wow, just to continue giving customer service that would not get me in trouble. I made myself a lunch though, and went off into the back kitchen, out of sight of the customers to eat. The customer then comes up to my coworker and tells my coworker to have me specifically make him whatever it is that he was watching me eat in the kitchen. So I went out and rang him up, and the entire time he was asking me about my personal life and made me feel very weird. After I made the customer's food and he went back to sit down, the manager came back from his errands and pulled me and my coworker into the back kitchen. He informed us that 2 other female employees had spoken with him earlier in the week about that exact customer making them feel weird. And my manager asked my coworker to make sure I got to my car safely at the end of my shift. I told my manager about the customer and how he had already made me feel weird by specifically tipping me just a large amount and requesting that I make his sandwich. My manager then finished up his things and left for good. As soon as my manager left again, the customer got worse. He then continued to tell me how it reminded him of a girl that he was chasing the other night at the bar. When I told him that it was for sure not me, he said, "Oh well, I wish it was." And from there, I tried to keep my distance and talk to my coworker. Out of the blue, he then informed me and my coworker of a young girl that he had tried to get with recently. We were freaked out when he said that and tried to ignore him to the best of our abilities. Later, my coworker asked how old I was, as I looked very young for my age, so I told him that I was 22. I thought I was speaking quietly enough that the customer didn't hear me say my age, but I was wrong, because the customer then immediately said, "Wow, you're beautiful for a 22-year-old. Which, thanks, I guess. Luckily, by this time, I had only a few minutes left in my shift, so I was trying to hurry up my last few things to get out of there on time and away from this man. He sees me cashing out my tips and goes, "Oh, is that your blue Pontiac out there in the parking lot?" And I said no. And then he continuously tries to guess which car was mine, and then eventually asked me what I drove. I lied about what car I drive because that was sending out a lot of red flags. As I finally cashed out my tips and grabbed my purse to go, the customer then stood up and said, "Well, guess it's time for me to leave." I waited until he left before me and had my coworker walk me to the car. I texted my manager and told him what happened. My manager, thankful for him, said he would talk to the customer next time he saw him, and He would let the other managers know to be on the lookout for him. I wrote here last month about the creepy guy on the bus who asked me if I had anybody waiting at home for me. Honestly, writing that out made me feel a lot better about the whole thing. So here, have another story. For some reason, I attract creepers, so there might actually be a good few of these stories still to come. Set the scene. I'm 17 years old, maybe older, definitely under 20 at least, and on dating websites because why not? I met a guy named Dave who seemed nice enough, and we get to talking. Get on okay and start chatting on Skype and stuff like that. All is fine, and we flirt a lot and end up doing various adult activities via Skype for a good few months until we decide to meet up. This is where the let's not meet crap begins. This is long because of my sheer hatred for this guy. Pretty sure half of this post is profanities. Also needed quite a few words to get across how much of a jerk he was. So I go and meet up with Dave and we go straight to his house, which I know. It was a bad idea, but I did it. I was on my period and at the time didn't use tampons. Sorry, but it's relevant. So I had a pad on. Couldn't see it or anything, but if you touched my butt, I guess you'd be able to feel it. I think you see where this is going. Anyway, get to his place, chill for a bit, and nothing happens because it's Shark Week. Not that he knows this yet. And then we start kissing. I explain everything to him. And he starts making jokes about it, which irritates me, but not enough to stop making out for a while longer, till I feel him squeeze my butt again and laugh to himself. I pull away, stop all of it, and awkward bit of time later, he walks me to the bus stop. It was dark on Halloween, and there was a drunk guy there who said we looked like a cute couple. I almost puked in my mouth, to be honest. I get home and sort myself out. Shark Week wise, get into bed, text him a goodnight, and hardly talk to him for a while because he replies with jokes about nappies and babies. For you Americans, by the way, nappies are what we Brits call diapers. That should be the end of it, right? Well, it wasn't. We go a while barely talking. I can't remember any specifics from that time except we try and get back in touch via Skype, and he almost immediately makes things sexual after I've explicitly told him not to do that if he wanted a second chance. So I block his ass. He messages me on Facebook, chatting stuff about how he's sorry and he has ADHD. Undiagnosed, by the way, but he relates strongly to it or some BS. We go back and forth a bit because I hate being disrespected and get angry easily, or did back then at least, and I enjoyed arguing because I was a POS. Again, it ends up in me telling him to screw off, him refusing, and me blocking him again. I also blocked him on the dating site that we met on as well as any other site I ever seen his face on. A year goes by and I get a message, and I think I recognize the picture but I'm not sure. So I reply anyway to be polite. It's him. He apologizes and I argue with him again, telling him I really truly never want to hear from him again and block him. Again, he goes on to make several more accounts on that site to talk to me. Same goes for Facebook. I also run into him. Well, he messages me on Plenty of Fish and OkCupid. We argue a lot there, to be honest. It was getting really weird and awkward and creepy, and I got super mad. I'd grown some balls and learned some big words by this point, so I had to go right at him. As per usual, the chat ended with me basically telling him to screw off and that he's blocked, and then blocking him. I actually have screenshots of the OkCupid conversation, as well as text that will soon be mentioned. Things go quiet again. And then, after going to the cinema with my sister to see Batman v Superman, he messages me on WhatsApp. I instantly start having a mild panic attack, have to use my inhaler. This guy triggers me so damn badly. I hate his guts for making me feel that way, and I still feel that way when I see his pictures on dating sites. Screw him. Anyway, it gets to the point where I'm still telling him to bug off. I block him on WhatsApp pretty quickly, and he resorts to texting and calling. Most of the texts are him telling me to pick up the phone with the odd "you are worthless" and stuff like that. Charming, really. Definitely winning me back over. Bear in mind, it's been at least 2 years at this point. He's harassed me on and off for 2 years. Anyway, again, I excuse myself from my sister. We are in McDonald's at this point. It's a random weeknight and quite quiet in the car park. And I step outside into the almost empty car park. I start screaming down the phone. I don't remember what I said. I didn't even think about my words when I was saying them. I just know I told him I'd report him for harassment and stuff if he didn't screw off. I had to go outside 3 more times just to scream down the phone. At one point, I was literally just screaming. No words, pure pent-up anger, and hatred for this jerk for ruining what was meant to be a great night with my baby sister. This is already getting too long, so I'll sort of taper off here. But basically, I blocked his number from texts and calls, and he still managed to get voicemails heard, though. The knob, and never heard from him again. I wish. Got messages from him several more times, both on the original app we met on and POF, but tended to block him right away after that. My mom was young-ish when she had me, 23, and she looked even younger than she actually was. She had taken me with her to the local mall on Black Friday and was now getting some new work clothes. A couple went up to her at one point and told her how cute I was. She thanked them and walked away. A while later, she realized the couple had been following us store to store. She wasn't sure if it was a coincidence or not, so she went to the food court, which was right next to the security desk. The couple came up to her again and told her that while she was brave for being a teenage mother, she shouldn't waste her youth being saddled with a child and that they could do a better job raising me than she could. They told her they would give her $5,000 for me. My mom was furious. She was a single mother, yes, but by choice. She broke off her engagement to my biological father a few months after she found out she was pregnant because he didn't want to deal with a child right after graduating from college. She had moved back to her hometown and had an apartment near her friend's house, and my grandma watched me while my mom was at work. She had a very well-paying job at Ford as well. She told them she was not a teenage mom and that she would get a security officer if they didn't leave us alone. They got angry and tried to grab my stroller, and my mom just took a deep breath and screamed as loudly as she could. It worked. 3 security officers came running from different directions, and the couple ran for it, leaving me behind. My mom explained the situation to the officers, and 2 officers took off after the couple, and 1 officer walked my mom to her car to make sure nothing more happened. The next day, my mom got a call from the police letting her know the couple had been arrested after they tried to take somebody else's baby as well. They were charged with multiple counts of attempted kidnapping. It turned out that the wife was infertile, but the couple didn't want to deal with the work of adopting a child. They had been following around young blonde women with babies in the hope that the baby would end up blonde as well, as the husband and wife were both blonde. I know they were sent to jail, but I'm sure they're both still there on multiple counts of attempted kidnapping. At least I hope they are. How messed up do you have to be to try and pressure mothers into giving away their children? I headed out to my local mall a few days ago, determined to do some serious Christmas shopping. As a bit of a reference, I'm only about 5'5" and quite thin. I have a shaggy pixie cut and prefer the comfort of big t-shirts and skinny jeans most of the time, so I get mistaken for a 12-year-old boy a lot more than I would like to admit. Sorry if this gets a bit long, by the way. So there I was, Christmas list in hand and ready to take this thing on like a champ. I had more money than I had for Christmas in a long time, and I was really excited to get some excellent gifts for my best friend and my parents. I was walking along on the ground floor, headed for the stairs, when I passed this lady who was giving out hand lotions. She had a few small packets in her hands and a larger bottle on a little table besides where she stood. Okay, cool, I think to myself. Grab a sweet-ass lotion packet and keep going. I didn't want to be rude and just kept walking, so I took the lotion and smiled in a sort of, thanks for that, kind of way. Before I had the opportunity to keep going, this chick grabs my wrist and lets out a squeal that would hurt a banshee's ears. You keep your nails natural? Like, yeah, I do. I clean for a living, so there's not much point in getting them done unless I'm going somewhere special. Sure, I said, and tried to wrench myself free. To my dismay, this lady has a hold on me like a hungry anaconda, and I knew I'd be stuck listening to her sales pitch. I was a bit confused as to why she had picked me out of the entire crowd of people walking, especially because the boots and studded jacket usually scared off potential creeps, and probably friends too, but hey. Unfortunately, all the leather and studs in the world did nothing for my baby face, so I probably still seemed easy prey for this asshole. She's all, look how great this makes your hands and nails, while all I could do was think why she thought I cared. My hands are all scarred and calloused from years of guitar practice, so there isn't much that can be done for them. I attempted a getaway by letting her know that I wasn't interested and that I had to get back to shopping before it got too late. She batted her eyelashes and said that, lucky me, since I was so cute, she would give me an entire set for the low price of $20 if I followed her to go get it from the stand upstairs. I had just come from the top floor of the mall since there were exits and entrances on both floors, and I knew for a fact that the only kiosk up there was an eyebrow threading place. No way I was going anywhere besides GameStop to get my little brother a new game for Christmas, so I declined. She tightened her hold and just repeated the sales pitch, this time asking me weird questions and between trying to convince me to buy this lotion. How old are you? 19. Where do you go to school? Graduated. Do you have a sister? No. Where's your boyfriend? I don't have one. I tried again to tell her nicely because I hate hurting people's feelings. Just screw right off and let me get back to Christmas shopping. When she stared dead into my eyes and said, "So you're alone." A million little alarms went off in my head and I lied and told her I was there with my dad. She looked around and asked which one he was. I pointed out the most intimidating looking guy I could find and she launched back in trying to sell me this product at warp speed, like she was in some kind of huge hurry. I told her again, more firmly this time, that I was not spending any money on her hand lotion. She started walking off in a random direction, still holding my wrist, and insisted that I come with her to see more of the products she was selling, because surely I would want something, despite the fact that every freaking word out of my mouth said the complete opposite. I yanked my arm free and stood my ground, prepared to defend myself if she tried pulling me with her again. "I am not buying anything from you. I need to get back to shopping." Before I could even turn away, she asked what I used to wash my face. A bit caught off guard, I told her, and she began launching a barrage of insults at me like, "You're too pale and your skin is so dry," featuring my personal favorite, "It looks like a shedding lizard." Ouch, that hurt. I didn't put any stocks into her petty attempts to insult me. People had complimented me on my skin before and I liked the way I look anyway. I walked away instead of throwing anything back at her and headed upstairs to finish shopping. But before I left the mall that night, I marched my dry lizard skin right over to the nearest mall cop and informed them that he had some rude people working in the mall. I wasn't sure who else to tell, so I wasn't too surprised to see him scrunch up his face in confusion. I expected him to direct me to a sort of complaints desk or something similar, but nothing could have prepared me for what he said next. "We don't sell that here." Well, crap. I described the woman and told him what brand of lotion she had tried to get me to purchase, but he only shook his head and told me the vendor for that particular brand had not been coming around to that mall for years. On my way back out to the parking lot, I passed the spot where she had originally confronted me. There was no woman, no samples, no vendor's cart. I later asked my cousin, who worked in the mall, if there was anybody selling that lotion there. She said no, and a quick peek at the mall's online directory confirmed it. I hate to think where we would have ended up had I followed her,